Enduro racing is all about going out for some big days riding, thrashing down some fast and rough trails as quick as you can, but also being self-sufficient. So often you're out for big days, doing some big climbs as well, so pushing your bike to the limit in both directions really. Same goes for enduro riding. Often you're out for long days, away from anything, and you're riding your bike hard. So it helps to be prepared and have some tools with you as well. So here's some hacks on how to be prepared for enduro racing or riding. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you've not done already. And let's kick it off with the first thing you'll need is tools. So there's a few different ways of carrying them. Modern trends means that you try and keep these things on your bike, and it definitely is better, I think, for racing rather than keeping them in your like bib shorts or in a backpack. Most people like to keep them on the bike somehow. A few different options. If you've got a bang up-to-date bike like my Orbea Rallon here, you'll have what I like to call the Enduro lunchbox. So some storage inside your frame. Loads of bikes have this nowadays. If you haven't got that, I guess the other options are to use those straps, which are really nice. Keep things, you know, nice and handy to get to. What I find with those, they don't work perfectly on every style of bike. Sometimes you don't have much space. So on this bike, I guess you've got a nice space there. You could stick one up there. The other disadvantage of those is they do rub your paint. If you're riding in all sorts of conditions, especially mud and wet, you'll find they can rub the paint off a little bit. So try and protect your bike if you're doing that. If you've got a nice bike like this, keep your tools somewhere where you know they're always going to be. Basically, I like to run things like tyre plugs, CO2 canisters, and a set of Allen keys. Luckily, I've got a set of Allen keys stashed away inside my bike somewhere else, so I don't need to use any space inside my Enduro lunchbox. I think running a tubeless setup is essential for enduro racing. All the top racers do that. But also I think for enduro riding, I think it's definitely better to run tubeless setup. But that also means you need to take some tyre plugs with you so you can fix any of those holes that you might find. I mean, I haven't done it in a long time, but if you rim out on a rock, you can rip the tyre. Sometimes tubeless sealant will help fix that, depending on how big it is. But if it's anything over 2 or 3 mil, the sealant won't do that, so you need a tyre plug. So have them, but the hack here is to have one of those preloaded. So I've got them in my little stash box down here. Under there is my tyre plugs, and rather than have to sort of fish this out and load one in, I've got one already stuck in that little tool, so I just need to whip that out and I can stick that straight into that damaged bit of tyre. The other little thing here you might find helps really well is actually, if you find where it's leaking, stick your thumb over it until you're ready, because as much pressure you can save in there, it's just going to help you fix it. If it goes completely flat, you've then got to stick your insert in and hope that it holds when you pump it back up. If you've still got some air in there, you can stick that plug in. If it's still leaking a bit, spin the tyre around, the sealant might fix that. If not, it might be time to stick your thumb back over that, try and seal it a bit longer, grab another plug, stick that in, and that might do the job. And you won't know that if your tyre's flat. You don't know until you've pumped it back up. So keeping a bit of air in there is going to help you fix it. And then hopefully it's a quicker to inflate it as well. You're not going to need as much pressure putting in with a pump or a CO2 canister. So preload a tyre plug. More of a general tip than a hack is for enduro riding, you probably want to run a fairly heavy duty wheel and tyre combo. Depending on where you are racing, how rough it is. For some enduro races where it's a big old day and there's a lot of pedaling, maybe it's not the gnarliest trails, then you can run some lighter wheels. I would kind of stick to enduro casing tyres personally, or if you're gonna go lighter, only go lighter on the front, because I always feel that the rear tyre takes most of the punishment. Some riders prefer the feel of alloy rims. If you're riding super rough, maybe alpine terrain where long descents are really punishing. Depends on the brand, but some alloy rims can be a bit more forgiving and they sort of ding rather than potentially have different failures. So it depends where you're riding. Some riders will like a lighter set of maybe carbon rims if you're riding somewhere like the UK, maybe you don't have the elevation and the long rough trails, then that's going to help you out. But like I say, I'd stick to enduro weight tyres. Tyre inserts can be a really good idea for enduro racing. Obviously, that's something that the pros may or may not use. You can't see inside their tyres. But for most riders, if you're riding rough terrain, it could be a really good idea. Especially if, like I was talking about wheels before, if you want to run maybe a lighter set of wheels or even tyres, running a tyre insert sort of bumps up how strong, how protective that combo can be. So you don't get a race result, obviously, if you don't finish the race, and tyres are the #1 place where you can have a mechanical, so ripping tyres, getting punctures, damaging wheels. So definitely think about tyre inserts. Essentially, they are, if I make it super simple, they're kind of foam strips that sit inside your tyres against the rim. That's going to give you that extra protection from impact. It's going to protect your tyre because there's just more material between that rock and your rim, so squashing your tyre in between the rim isn't going to happen as much. And it also gives you a bit more stability, depending on a different brand. Some are super lightweight, don't give you that much. Some are a bit tougher, they sit a bit closer to the rim and they will give you sidewall stability. So if you want to, you can then run lower tyre pressures as well. Riding fast over gnarly terrain means that a full face helmet is often the best choice. And actually for a lot of enduro races, they're essential, they're mandatory, you have to run a full face helmet. But the disadvantage of that, obviously, is for climbing, especially if it's in hot conditions. You can get really hot inside these things. The great thing now is a load of enduro sort of focused full face helmets like this POC Oticon on the market, where you've got loads of venting, obviously in the front as well. So for low speeds, they vent pretty much as well as a normal helmet. So pretty good for pedaling in. What you might find on some of the more downhill orientated full face helmets where you don't have all this padding, like I say, they will get hot. So what you quite often see pro riders doing is actually taking out the cheek pads of their helmets, just so they've got more space inside there and you've got more room for the air to circulate. So when they're climbing, they'll keep the helmet on, because you often have to do that, part of the rules of the race. You can't just go riding around without a helmet. And they'll actually get their goggles, stick them over the back of their helmet, like so, and then tuck their cheek pads in there so that basically they don't lose them. I've never actually done this. I've always felt like it's kind of risky, because if you do drop one of those, your helmet, I don't know actually the rules and regulations, you might find that you can't then race if you haven't got cheek pads in your helmet, but I just don't want to lose them. Seems like a bit risky. Like I say, you don't have that problem with these enduro full face helmets, so if you're serious about racing enduro, you might want to think about getting one of these style helmets so you don't get too hot. You might find with enduro racing that because it's a long day out, you might have 5 or 6 or 7 stages, that you're not going to be able to ride those stages 100% with using all your energy like a downhill race. So there'll be times in stages, or even if you're not racing, like if you're riding kind of enduro style, where it might be a long descent, you can't ride it 100% the whole time. So there'll be places where you're trying to save energy. Racers do this a little bit. You might see them stand up kind of straight, maybe on a fire road where they know they can get away with it, or even sit down. In my sort of UK enduro racing days, there'll be stages that were quite flat sometimes, and I'll just pop the seat up, and on that fire road, I'll still try and power as much as I can. I'll just sit down, crank in a big gear, try and get along that bit as fast as I can, and then seat down, stand back up when it comes back to rough stuff. Like I say, it does translate to riding as well, where you know you can't go flat out the whole time. So try and steal a bit of energy where you can to try and make sure you get to the end as fast as you can. Same goes for fueling. Get a good breakfast in you that you know has got energy is going to last you days, something like porridge, sort of slow release energy. Often, even when I was racing, I'd try and rely on taking normal food with me, so maybe a cereal bar or half a sandwich, rather than relying on gels and things like that could maybe be a bit dodgy for your stomach. Having said that, I would always save a gel, or maybe even a caffeinated gel, for later in the day. Wouldn't take that too early, or even sugary things. I wouldn't want to take jelly babies and like that too early in the day. I feel like you can peak and trough with those things. Save them for sort of that end of the race, and coming up to the last stage or the end of the ride, when you need that last little bit of a kick to get you through and get you home. Right, there you go, there's a few enduro hacks. Have you got any more? Let me know down below. I know for other sort of makeshift tool storage, I've seen people do loads of different things. Sometimes people like to fold up a zip tie and stick it through the inside of their crank axle, or even tyre plugs, you can stick them in your bar end plugs, loads of different things like that. Let me know any good ones that you know of, because it's going to help us all out as well. Give us a thumbs up if you love riding enduro.